Hello loves, welcome to my museum. I think it's pretty obvious at this point that I love old items. I love antique and vintage clothes, accessories, furniture, and trinkets, and I've grown quite the collection over the years, mostly from thrift stores and antique markets. I feel as though I have a little mini museum within the place I call home, and I absolutely love to yap about all of these beautiful items full of history. In this video, I plan to show you some of these items and discuss everything I know about them. I absolutely love the look and quality of vintage and antique items. I've grown up going to thrift stores and secondhand shops, and I think that's really garnered my love for old, well-made items. Before we begin, I just want to clarify that I view anything 20 years or older as vintage and 100 years or older as antique. I know people use the techniques used or the materials made to decipher that, but I'm just going to go with that very broad definition. I am definitely not a professional when it comes to these items, especially the furniture, but they all hold such interesting stories and they're so beautiful that I just really felt like I needed to share this with you today, especially as someone who really loves history. I'm going to start with my, not one, not two, but 4 vintage Gunny Sacks dresses. The first dress I bought out of the bunch. It is a floor-length prairie dress from the 70s. I got this at the Goodwill outlet for about $5. They price by the pound there, so I believe it's every pound is about $2. I love the bib type of design, and the huge amount of fabric makes the dress flow so beautifully. It is small on me, so it does not zip up all of the way. I usually just place this corset that I wear in basically all of my videos on top of the dress. Next we have the dress I'm wearing right now. It is so beautiful, and I actually just bought this. I went to one of my local thrift shops and I found this for just $10. It is the quintessential 70s gunny sack style dress with the lace up front and the beautiful lace on the top. This is definitely a prairie style dress. I haven't completely deep cleaned it yet, and I'm hoping to get some of these old stains out as I did for my previous dress, but it's absolutely gorgeous. Next we have this Gunny Sacks apron dress that I bought. I think it was 2020 or 2021. It was about $50 on eBay if I'm not mistaken. I believe it's also from the 70s. It's pretty simple with this lace and these big pockets as well. Perfect pockets for flower picking, I might add. I love the waistline and how it makes this sort of downward point that I really like. A lot of the corsets that I like have this waistline, so it kind of gives the same look. I don't wear this one very often, but it's so pretty. Last for the Gunny Sacks dresses, we have this behemoth of a dress. I also found this one from the Goodwill bins, so this one was also priced by the pound. I like this dress more for costumes and collectible value than actually wearing out, but the neckline is very decadent and beautiful, and the skirt has so much light fabric that it gives the dress so much movement. Next we have these 3 books full of historical value. I found all 3 of these books at the Goodwill outlet for 50 cents each. I'm going to save my favorite for last, but this is the first book. This first one is a religious-centered memoir about the life of John B. Gough from the 1880s. It is called Platform Echoes. It isn't in the best condition, but I find any old books tempting. This was a gift from an aunt to her niece, as you can see by the little note in the top corner, written in 1884. Also, as I was flipping through the pages, I found this newspaper clipping from Omaha, Nebraska on January 11th, 1898. The newspaper discusses topics like the Spanish-American War, most notably, as well as some worker strikes occurring in the northern US. It's just incredible to see these preserved primary sources. I can hold them and I can look at them anytime I want. Secondly, we have this standard encyclopedia by L. Calange LLD, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. This is certainly newer than the other book. I believe the copyright date is 1896, and the newest US census in this book is the 1890 census. This book has these beautiful illustrations and shows so much about history over a century ago. Interestingly, even though I'm not a complete war nut in the history space, I thought the weaponry page was notable due to the extreme difference in weaponry before the World Wars and our modern history. Many of these words are very different from the ones we know today as well, and it shows us some of the vocabulary used in topics that were most interesting to individuals during the Victorian period, like botany and Greco-Roman culture. It is just so interesting to see history through that Victorian era lens. Also, if you want to win Scrabble, definitely pick up an old encyclopedia because some of these words are crazy. This last one is my absolute favorite, called Museum of Antiquity by L.W. Yagi and T.L. Haynes. This book was published in 1882 and it describes ancient life in specifically Egypt, Italy, and Greece. It's a very fragile book, so I've been afraid to go in depth reading it and ruining the spine, but I have read parts and what I have read has been very interesting. I also take history books from this era with a grain of salt, especially if they don't have primary sources throughout, but it is a beautiful copy and I love looking at all of the illustrations and reading parts of this once in a while. It discusses so much about mythology and art. This book is also interesting because it has this note on the top corner from a grandmother to her granddaughter, as well as a small letter found in one of the book pages from the same granddaughter to her parents after she moved away from them in the 1920s. This is such an amazing piece of history, not only because it's showing old research, but we're seeing these endearing interactions between family members in the late 19th and early 20th century. Next we have my absolute favorite and most elaborate piece, since I couldn't wait to show it off. It is this gorgeous French oak buffet. My partner, my mom, and I live together and the buffet is in a shared space where we can all enjoy its beautiful presence. It's the oldest piece I own, dating back to the 18th century. I am not aware of an exact date, but I would guess 1750s to 1790s from my very, very amateur knowledge. The carvings in the wood are so lovely, depicting flowers and these male figures. The carpenters used dovetail joints also to make this piece sturdy and pleasing to the eye, and I love the wood design here, put together like puzzle pieces. The brass pieces are not authentic, but I think they're absolutely gorgeous nonetheless. I think the brass gives into the whimsical design of it. I bought this piece at an antique market recently. She was selling the item for $3,295 if I'm not mistaken, but I only paid $1,500 in 4 installments. The seller was so kind and she really tried to help out by bringing down the price so much and letting me pay in so many installments. I've practically lived out of thrift stores my whole life, so a purchase like this is very, very rare. But this is definitely my most beautiful and unique purchase out of all of the purchases in my collection. Following that last piece is very difficult, but this turtle pincushion is definitely a top contender for one of my favorite collection items. In high school I was in dance and it was the last show at the very end of my senior year. Of course, after the show everyone was congratulated with flowers and all these balloons and everything from their family members and friends, but then my mom, instead of flowers, she got me this turtle pincushion. And she knows me so incredibly well because I absolutely squealed when I saw this, and everyone else that had flowers was just completely jealous because look at him. I named him Camelot because there is something quite Middle Ages-esque about him. He was definitely made within the last 50 years, but his aura is medieval in my opinion, so thank you to my mom. Next I want to switch back to apparel and show off some dresses that aren't gunny sacks. First we have this beautiful floral dress from the 50s. I love the beautiful yellow roses, the beautiful puffed out skirt, and the happy yellow color. This was my grandmother's prom dress and that connection is so significant to me. I just love how it feels like a passing of girlhood anytime a woman in your family gifts you something that was very important to them in their teens and early adulthood. It just makes it so much more memorable and the memories kind of go through the item. The yellow roses also remind me of that American folk song, The Yellow Rose of Texas. And it has a very tragic history if you want to read up on that, but it is a really beautiful song and I don't know, it always makes me think of that every time I see this dress. Secondly, we have this J. Peterman dress. J. Peterman was a retail company that started in the late 80s. They sold reproductions of old clothing and clothing from films. They're still around from what I researched online. However, some of their recreations are a lot more modernized and it seems like they make pretty cheap reproductions. They just don't really look as good as they used to. This dress is absolutely gorgeous though. It's an antique recreation, probably of an Edwardian creation, and it's so well made. The lace and the embroidery is just so beautiful and I love the pink accents here and there. It's such a beautiful recreation and once again I found this at the Goodwill bins. So I got this for about $1. We have this incredible dress from the 1990s. This one is pretty new in comparison to the older items that I've shown in this video. However, I'm showing this because 1, it's absolutely gorgeous. 2, it has kind of a 1920s resurgence look to it. Between the beautiful beaded top to the 90s style skirt that kind of reminds me of the fringe on flapper costumes. I say costumes because, fun fact, they didn't really ever wear fringe from what I've read. Anyways, I bought this dress at Goodwill for $7.99 and the brand is K Studio if you're interested. The last dress I'm going to show is this beautiful brown dress that once again my grandmother gave to me. I don't know exactly what time period this dress is from, I believe 1960s to 1980s, and is Jack Harley, and everything I can find from that brand is around the same time period. I love the rose type design on the neckline and the flowing fabric is so beautiful. Every time I wear this, my mom talks about how she remembers my grandmother wearing this throughout her younger life, and it's just so interesting to carry so many memories through clothing. Next we have this replica of a 1927 telephone from the 1990s. While this isn't actually very old, it falls into that 20-year vintage time frame that I was talking about earlier, so I decided to include it. Also, it's a replica from the 1920s, so it just works. My favorite part about this item is that it was completely free. I found this on the side of the road during my walk on heavy trash day through the neighborhood. It was at least a mile from my house, so I had to go and grab it later after my walk, but I just can't believe someone would just throw away something like this. Of course, a kid, I guess, wrote with marker on the item, as you can see right here, but I think I could get it out, and if not, it's still such a cool item to get for completely free. I doubt it actually works, or else I believe they would have kept it for themselves or at least tried to sell it, but it's just such an amazing item. Next we have this beautiful jewelry box. Top depicts the dancer Camargo, a piece by Nicholas Socret from 1730. Of course this is simply printed on, but I believe it's printed onto Japanese silk. I know that it's vintage, but I can't say what era for sure. I love the red velour inside as well. I found this at one of my local thrift stores for about $5, I want to say 5 or 6 years ago, and it's been one of my favorite pieces in my collection ever since. I keep switching between furniture and trinkets and clothing, so I'm sorry for my inconsistent nature, but we're moving on to jewelry next. I have an entire separate video dedicated purely to my jewelry collection, so today I'm only going to talk about 2 items. I just can't film a vintage and antique video without showing some sort of jewelry, so we're going to start with this cameo I bought in La Spezia in Italy at an antique market. This antique market was so good. It had so many beautiful items for such a decent price. It was only 10 euros. I think that's a really good price for one of this size and this much detail. I'm not sure which era this comes from, but this pendant was made from a shell in Naples. Cameos are made when a relief image is a different color to the background, and artists will carve into a gemstone or a shell where the 2 contrasting colors meet. So on this cameo, one side is the white part of the shell, while the other side is that brownish pink color. This necklace is so beautiful, and I go between this necklace and this one pretty much every day. I definitely get a lot of use out of it, and it's gorgeous. The other piece of jewelry is this beautiful piece of brass. Got this at another antique market in Barcelona for 20 euros. This used to be a pin from the 1920s, I believe, but the back is missing, so I thread ribbon through this to make it into a necklace usually. I'm trying to find a way to make this into a hairpin though. I think this would be so gorgeous and just give the daintiest, most beautiful little touch. I love this item because it's particularly a perfect souvenir from Barcelona. The city is known for its decadent Art Nouveau style architecture, so finding a pin that was Art Nouveau-like, even if it was made a couple decades after the Art Nouveau movement, I just thought that was a beautiful souvenir. Next we have these really beautiful brass rubbings that my grandmother gave my mom and I. People used to go to these English churches, and on the floors they would have these brass inlays, and they would take some paper and some wax. They would put the paper on top of the brass and start rubbing the wax onto the paper, and it would create these brass rubbings. This was very popular in the Victorian era, but it made a resurgence in the 1970s as well. My grandparents, my mom, and my mom's brother used to live in England, and they actually used this method to create these brass rubbings. It's such a cool family heirloom, and even though it's my mom's more than it is mine, she told me I could show off these brass rubbings, so here you are. Next on the list, we quickly have this beautiful needlepoint bag. I do not have a clue when this was made, since the popularity of needlepoint bags were kind of consistent throughout the 20th century from what I have researched. However, it is absolutely gorgeous. I love the floral pattern and the brass details. It's also very spacious, so I can use this pretty often. I truly think every girl just needs a purse like this, just a really old, very cool looking purse. Lastly, we have this beautiful wooden box that I got in the UK. My mom's friend lives near Barnard Castle in northern England, so we went to go visit and I absolutely loved it, by the way. Such a cool place. I absolutely adored the castle ruins and the cool pubs, and most importantly, the amazing antique shop where my mom got this for me for £35. I just couldn't take my eyes off of it. It's such a beautiful piece. I use this mostly for any excess fabric I have. I love when leaves and flowers are depicted in wooden pieces, and it has an Art Nouveau kind of look to it that I just love. Because it looks Art Nouveau-like, I want to say it's from the 1910s, but it could easily be from the 1920s or 30s as well. If any of you know when you think this was made, I would really appreciate the input, so please leave a comment. Anyways, that is all I have for you today. Thank you for perusing my little gallery with me. If you like this video, I would really appreciate it if you would please subscribe and go check out any other videos on my channel that interest you. Thank you so much once again, and I will see you next time. Goodbye!